This is the Changing Times, Changing World, bringing you the Otherworldly, our weekly show to tease you and tempt you into coming to the conference, or you can just enjoy the show, but I think the conference is a fun thing. Tonight's show, I'm going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart, which is food and magic, and what you can do with food and magic, because there's so much. I mean, if you think of magic, one of the first things that most people think of is potions, and potions are what we are going to they're what we consider edible. So that is kind of a beginning to food, but it just tickles the edge of it. There is so much that has to do with food that we should talk about, can talk about. I'm going to start out with just what we can call a silly story, which is one day my daughter came in and she was exhausted and she said, "I have no energy. I need more Uru's energy." Now, Uru's is the vitality rune in the Norse runes. And put on her Uru's pendant. And I said, well, what you need to do is you need to take that into yourself. And she picked up the pendant and she stuck it in her mouth and without helping her. And so I reminded her, as she well knew, because she was a teenager and had to give me a hard time, that you can write a rune on on the peanut butter on your toast. You can use it you can put it on, you can put a heart on your bologna with mustard. You can make magical sigils in your food. You can draw a pentagram in your spaghetti sauce to bless it while you are cooking. This is not rocket science. This is magic. and this is not necessarily as hard as or as impossible as some people think. It is as simple as writing on your food. An old Anglo-Saxon spell has writing runes on a plate, taking ale and washing what you have written on the plate with your finger. It wasn't that you were writing with ink or anything. You were just using your finger and you washed it off the ale and into a cup and fed it to the patient. We can do that. We have the technology. Oh, Jenny, I love your background. You've got a special background for us. I got it there. Look at that. That's great.
Oh.
You can, yay. But
I mean,
but
if you're talking stuff like that, that goes back to, there was an Egyptian story about a man who basically copied out the Book of Thoth, soaked the papyrus in beer, drank the beer, and absorbed all the knowledge from the Book of Thoth.
There you go. Which may be why we have so many cups that just have the futhark incised around them. They'll put the entire thing. As Christians would put Alpha and Omega, basically it contains everything. So if you're using other systems, you can use those. But in the season after the Urus incident, we were doing pagan fairs and festivals and things, and we got a box of just one of those little sorting boxes and put in sugar cubes and used food coloring to put various runes on the sugar cubes, so people could take them and put them into their coffee and ingest the magic that way. This is not a,
Mm.
as I say, it's not hard. All you have to do is think of it.
Excuse me.
I've heard people recently making being sad because there is no holy water easy to get at because churches are locking themselves up. Well, you can bless your own water. You do not need to be the scion of the Messiah to get holy water. Freaking bless it yourself. We make
Jar, water, quartz crystals, full moon.
I do nothing more than I will take the chalice and I will hold it up and I will exhale with intent blessings into the water 3 times. And if you have an altar, you've learned how to bless water. So that you have holy water. We did discover when we were doing that the cats much preferred to drink the holy water than the water in their bowl. So we started blessing the cat's water bowl. It's not hard.
Well, I would have to bless gallons of water on that basis, but that's probably not a bad idea. But I do like the idea of blessing the water. In my case, it would be a matter of summoning the essence of white light to purify the water. And once I had done that, then take the water from there.
Yeah.
And whatever system you're using is the right system for you to use. I mean, if you want to go to a church and get it out of their font, that'll work. It's lovely blessed water, but you can bless your food. You can bless your by writing on it, or simply by infusing energy into it. As we have mentioned at other times, there may be you might want to cleanse it first, but most food is pure enough that you don't need to banish any bad influences from it. And my experience with most herbs is that they partake of a magical essence in their in how they grow. They do. That's just a thing that they do, and they want to help us. I mean, what an interesting being that chooses to grow in order to be ingested in order to help another being. But that seems to be what herbs do. God bless them, the gods bless them, whatever.
Yep.
And but if they do, then let us do what they choose to do. That is what they have decided to do with their lives. So there are things that we can learn. For instance, one of the earliest things that I learned energetically was to perceive what's happening with energy when you're using it. So if you, for instance, cross yourself in a standard Catholic way, you find that what you're doing is you're locking yourself in, you're putting up a ward. If you go the other way, you are opening yourself up. So this is just a little bit of magic that many people do all the time. A dangerous situation comes up, they cross themselves. It's just something that we can do. If you are stirring something, and there's a lot of holiday recipes out there, from fruitcake to whatever, that say that you must stir with, clockwise, or you want to stir Jersel and not Widdershins, and it blesses the food. So
you're raising energy.
Exactly, and there's many times where they say you do that, and everybody in the household needs to give at least 7 stirs to the fruitcake batter. You got everybody up there doing it, and I mean, that's blessing the heck out of it. Or,
Is that why fruitcake lasts for 1,000 years?
No, that's the
What?
brandy.
I think the brandy
Well,
may have something to do with it.
yeah, a preservative. Well, you mentioned about coming from your own system, and I think about myself as a Zen practitioner and former engineer, but I've always been fond, there's an alternative crossing, and there's like one step missing, but you end up making kind of a cross in a circle, and the final is eternal spirit. And I rather like that one. Oh, by the way, we're talking about herbs. Well, Jen put sage on the shopping list, and I have now a tincture of sage that has been in there and you can't see it on the screen, but that is a really, really dark green. And I'm about to put that out in the spray bottle and start hosing my room with it. And we'll see how that works. It's just magic in action based on your recommendation, Sean. Because I'd never thought about culinary herbs, and we just went to Wegmans and rescued the last of the fresh sage they had, which was kind of a sorry-looking bunch. But I took it home and diced it up fine and put it in this bottle. And then laid a bunch of. One of the questions was, I had the standard rubbing alcohol, which is 70%, and I don't know if 91% would have been better, or does it make a difference?
Nah, not really.
Okay, so you could use either one.
Yeah, and just
Okay.
remember, if it's gonna be ingested, use grain alcohol.
Right. This is not going to be ingested, so I'm not going to be
So
trying to swallow.
Regular isopropyl alcohol is perfect.
Right, because this is basically a tincture to be rubbed on, sprayed, whatever. And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's like my bruise juice, which is arnica flowers and rubbing alcohol.
Mm. But that was the one thing I've been working on, and it feeds right into tonight's topic in the sense that this is a magical application of, a basic food herb.
Yep.
I love the smell of sage. It's wonderful stuff. But after I got done hacking it all up into tiny little pieces, the kitchen smelled of sage for about 3 days, which...
And I'm sure the cats expected a turkey.
They expect to be fed. I don't know if they were looking for a turkey.
Well, culinary sage and, Thanksgiving and Christmas.
So there was an ancient Roman who said that if you anyone who has sage that has no reason to be ill. So.
Aha.
I'm trying to remember whether it was Cicero or somebody else. But yeah, I mean, herbs are a big thing. I was very amused. I suppose most people will recognize if I mention Cunningham various. Usually, that Cunningham had a whole lot of books that he gave information on how to, correspondences. I'll put it in the chat. And he was, he collected a lot of it. And of course, when you're a new baby witch, you want to look at all of those things and say, ooh, what can I do with this? What do I do for money? What do I do for sex? What do I do for whatever? And then I discovered that almost all of the Christmas spices, all the sweet spices, are good for sex and money and love. So if you want cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, all of those. So, just make yourself some nice cookies and put them in your pie, whatever. I don't know. I have never figured that if you give a guy a nice apple pie, it's not going to hurt anything. So, but people will, but think about just the concept of any holiday food. We share food in celebration as a way. It is like unto communion. It is how, by sharing food with other people, you become joined with them by partaking of the same thing. In Hindu celebrations, people bring offerings for whichever god they are honoring that day. The priest takes it and puts it on the altar, and then the priest takes flowers or candy or food or whatever it is, and he distributes it to the crowd. And it has been accepted as a gift by the god by being put on the altar, and then that is being given as a blessing to the people who have come to worship, because it has been blessed on the altar, which strikes me as a brilliant way of handling it. In a Shinto household, they have the little altar on the side of the dining room, and they put the food on there for the ancestors and the kami, and then it is just set there, and then it is moved to the table and everybody eats it. Sharing your food with the gods does not preclude it. It's not like these people who leave an offering on an altar and then let it sit there to rot. That's kind of not what was intended.
Well, I believe I've heard the phrase sharing the fruits of sacrifice.
Yeah.
And when you put it on the altar, you're sacrificing to the gods, but the gods then say, here, keep the material part. So
and this is where the term Holocaust came from. A Holocaust was an offering where the whole damn animal, everything, was burned to go to God without sharing it to the people. It implied a certain type of sacrifice that meant that it wasn't to be shared with the congregation. And so it was something like the Roman term decimated, which people frequently use now to mean, wow, everybody was wiped out. It's like, no, it means 1 in 10.
Right.
That's what it means. But
a chosen few were chosen to do the decimation.
Yeah.
Which that was pretty harsh discipline.
That was, because then they had to do it to their own people. But wanting to go on other practices that you do, but sharing your food, any type, you gotta mention saying grace. You gotta mention blessing the food. The food comes to the table. You pour your essence onto it if you haven't already done it during the cooking. If you're eating at a restaurant, you still bless the food before ingesting it. Part of that is not unlike if you bless it, you are in effect chasing off any negative influences that you didn't want to be taking into yourself, for goodness sakes. You don't want to be taking bad stuff into yourself because it's going to become a part of you. For goodness sakes, that's not something that you want to fool around with, and you can't. I want to get back to herbs a little bit later, but other things I noticed. Debbie has come here. When Jane Sibley would do a Norse working, which is a really powerful healing circle that Jane would do at events, at the end, Debbie often would bring out these sacks of chocolate chip cookies, because there is nothing quite as grounding as a good hunk of chocolate. when I read in Harry Potter that Madame Pomfrey was handing the traumatized kids chunks of chocolate, I said, ah, good, she knows her stuff. But yeah, the chocolate chip cookies, they're grounding. Heck, almost anything with a lot of sugar in it is grounding, and I'm not sure why. But sugar is, of course, as we know, something that is so highly purified that it should be treated as a drug. And it acts on our systems like a drug, but it isn't necessarily bad for you. It's simply really powerful and needs to be treated with respect. But the other thing is, if you pray, if you are saying grace, I read a book on prayer once, and yes, anybody who has listened to me much knows that I am more than a bibliophile, I'm a biblioholic. The book on prayer talked about how they were working in the third world, and they would pray on the milk that they got from the goats. And if you prayed, the milk would last 2 or 3 days. And if you didn't, it would sour overnight. So that was a, like, wow, look at the power of prayer. And then in order to show his friends when he got back home, he left the milk on the counter overnight and prayed on it, and it still soured. And so he interpreted that as the powers that push that power prayer aren't going to do it for somebody to show off. They're only going to do it when it's important for the family's survival. And that struck me as an important thing. But yeah, if you and I'm remembering there was something, Silva mind control. It was very big in the 70s. And
Yes.
Robert Silva would come into people, if his friends were in the hospital, and he would essentially touch and bless their water glass and put healing energy into it. This is something we all can do. Books can remind us of the innate power that we have as human beings. It can give us techniques. And I am the last person to say that these techniques do not work. I will say that sometimes one technique works better for somebody else than another technique. Each person needs to find the ones that work for them. Working outside your own belief system is liable to make it less likely to work. And so that is something that you can use human energy. I'm assuming it's what we call ki or odd or mana, to make your food last longer, to make it heal, to make it calm. If anybody has not heard of Bach's Rescue Remedy, it's preserved. It's a flower essence. They've soaked stuff in. It's been percussed like homeopathic things, and then it's got some preservative in. But it is essentially an energetic essence that helps if you are not. It helps you recover from a shock to the system, whether it's emotional or physical. One of the things that I noticed when I started using when I had little kids, and we had farm animals, and if they would be injured, I would put some in their drinking water, and they did better with that. So, because you never function as well when you've got a shock to your system. So, gee, what a surprise. But what am I going to say? Okay, for some reason I'm drawing a blank. Does anybody else have any stories that they wanted to tell or share with people?
Well, something similar when it comes to energetics and using homeopathics. A friend of ours' dog had done something to her back and she couldn't walk. And so they were having to take her outside to do her business. And they were seriously considering, well, ladies, you know, she's X years old and maybe we need to. I happen to have my kit with me. So we put a couple of arnica, we put a couple of hypernicum, I put a couple of silica into her water bowl and she drank it right down. And about an hour later, she got up and scratched at the door and lasted another 5 years.
Wow.
For those people who say homeopathics are the placebo effect, I don't think dogs understand the placebo effect.
No.
Well, they might, but we've also proven that the placebo effect does work, even for people who know it's the placebo effect. I was just dumbfounded reading a research paper where they were testing pain relief. And at one point, one of the things they filtered out was the fact that some of the participants knew they were getting a placebo, but they said, I don't care. It relieves my pain. And I see this as it was just a material component to activate the mind. And that all by itself, this was a good, well done, double-blind study in which some of the participants still figured out they were getting a sugar pill and they didn't care because it worked. And that left me saying, okay, where do you go with that? Except that you really can't rule things out. You don't know what will work. And the power of the mind is never to be underestimated.
Absolutely not.
I am very lucky that my doctor is both a homeopath and an allopath. Actually, she's an osteopath, but she very often combines homeopathic remedies along with remedies that are gotten from the drugstore. And frankly, I don't care which one works as long as one works.
Yeah, and DOs are more likely to do that than MDs are. And I got that because when I was a respiratory therapist some 50 odd years ago, my training took place in an osteopathic hospital. And it was really kind of an education. I forget what the MDs call the osteopaths, but I do know that MD stood for monkey doctor. But yeah, and the fact that the osteopaths have to take the same 4,000 hours of training to become a doctor, and they do seem to be rather more open-minded about alternative healing.
Slower nature.
The other thing about homeopathy is we're also now a global culture, and we're getting resources from all over, and we're still only scratching the surface on the remedies and the uses for the plants of this world. I mean, every day when they're combing through the Amazon or going through some of the other places, they're finding plants that they've never seen before. And this is where, you know, we're not putting as much emphasis into things, but also because of ethnocentrism, we have dismissed a lot of the natural remedies and everything else that came from the indigenous people of different areas who actually understood a lot of this. And it's only recently really getting looked at. It's a phenomenal thing. And when you have cultural interruption, like what happened to a lot of the Native Americans, they're having a reclamation and a reawareness of a lot of those traditions that they're having to rehash, essentially.
And it's not just ethnocentricity, although that is a huge problem. The other problem is in corporate America today, we look at the impact that this has on research, and basically nothing is worth researching unless it will make a lot of money for big pharma. And natural remedies from the Amazon do not make $1 billion for Pfizer, so they don't care. And we have to fight this battle to get the research done, to learn from the elders and the shamans and the herbalists, and do it in spite of the obstacles thrown up. You know, because the first thing I do when I read a research paper is I ask myself, who paid for this? And what do they benefit by the results? And it's the same kind of critical thinking. If somebody says anything, the first thing you say, who benefits if this is true? And it does allow me to distinguish a lot of decent research from crap. And I try really hard to make my decisions based on research that I think is at least ethically straight.
Well, look at the COVID. Look at the COVID vaccine, for example. There are a lot of third world countries and other countries that are pushing for the opening up of the patents on these vaccines so that people from other areas can develop it. But the pharmaceutical companies are like, no. And
no, they want to make money off it.
Yeah, well, see, there's the problem, because we had a chance as a global community to make COVID not so much of a global phenomenon, or more importantly, not an event that's going to become a yearly event like the flu. But because of politics and because of lack of stupidity, you name it. Yeah, we're now going to probably have to deal with COVID from here on out.
Right, and I think I struggle over the issue of patents on things like drugs. And I think there's a line you could draw that when something becomes a pandemic affecting every country in the globe, at that point, the profit motive has to be put aside, and the people developing the drugs need to make them basically open source for the sake of the global community good. And, you know, as long as we still have this greed motivated corporate capitalistic ethic, we're still going to see people holding back and lawsuits over patents and all this nonsense. And we've got some of the best pharmaceutical researchers on the planet. I mean, the development of the COVID vaccine is, in my memory and from what I can tell, we can do the most amazing things, but we don't always do them for the right reasons.
Right.
And, you know, and you have this terrible conflict between the corporate executives in their boardroom who make decisions for all the wrong reasons, and at the same time, you know, it could be so much better. And Jen has something to contribute here.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing.
We're all reading the chat, yes. So, okay. Jen, your turn.
Thank you. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the magic and the possibility of magic in preparing food before. But I know that for a long time, I have consciously chosen food for not just neurological effect, but medical effect. And that may be the same thing, really, get down to it. I'm on an endorphin high right now from having a nice meal of a good brie, a good sticky brie, and yeah, and some nice crackers.
$16 a pound brie, yeah.
Well,
you're not eating a whole pound.
No.
Not at once, no.
No.
Well,
Just allow
but-
me for more meals. Yes.
yeah, I was
But it
reading an
isn't-
article. Oh, I'm sorry. Continue.
No, I was going to say, I'm going to follow up on what Jen just said, because one of the things I've dealt with as her life partner is the fact that she is profoundly affected by these things in a way that I am not. And I know that sometimes if I am, Dr. William trying to prescribe, I may look at that and said, you need chocolate, you need stinky cheese, you need, and dear God, you could, if she loves this brie that you could clear the room with, but it works. And as an engineer, this first thing we say is, does it work?
Mhm.
Okay, well, remember that. And I do take some comfort from food. I have preferred foods, but I know for Jen, it crosses some invisible threshold into being medicine, and it's chosen on that basis and dispensed on that basis.
Yes. But there are foods I can recognize a mood, I can recognize a feeling in my stomach or my head or somewhere, and figure out the right food to eat for it.
Right.
How it affects me.
So we
Well,
actually
that-
do
that does
apply.
sound like magic.
Mhm.
One of the things as a sociologist I look at, and it was a tool that was given to me by another teacher friend, and that was what he called the 1 hour bubble.
Okay.
And that 1 hour bubble is to look at what resources do you have within that 1 hour bubble. Are you within a hospital in a 1 hour bubble?
Mhm.
Are you within reach of a grocery store, a quality grocery store within that 1 hour bubble? Are you close to a library in that 1 hour bubble? Are you close to a school in that 1 hour bubble? And then you look at what jobs are available within that 1 hour bubble. And what is the income potential within that 1 hour bubble? And the access to resources such as lumber or such as first aid equipment, other things that you need to live on within that 1 hour bubble. And the key is that 1 hour bubble is pivotal in terms of when you start breaking down the income variable. That 1 hour bubble is way more impacting the second you get below the poverty line, because then transportation becomes an issue. Then access to medical care becomes an issue. Then access to an actual hospital in some locations becomes an issue. And the timing when you have a medical emergency of getting care within that 1 hour, it can be pivotal on things like heart attacks or strokes
Right.
or asthma. So, and that's where my friend was working on a PhD based on that whole premise of that 1 hour bubble as a qualifier of your quality of life. And this is where homeopathy and old farmers' remedies can become very useful in areas where access to resources is not as plentiful.
Absolutely.
And especially helpful in rural communities like where I live, where people are more self-reliant. And this is where understanding the plants and animals and the ecology where you live is also important, because that also influences what remedies are in your area. Case in point, in my area, a lot of places, people are ripping up all the mesquite off their property. And the thing is, the Native Americans considered the mesquite a most holy and life-giving plant because of all of the medicinal uses of the mesquite plant, from the bark to the pulp to the needle to the seed pod and everything. I mean, there was so much life. And I'm looking around me at the different plants and animals and mostly the animals and birds and animals that interact with the mesquite. And I'm clearly seeing that because for the mesquite, the animals eat the bark to get some of the moisture and for pain relief and stuff. And they eat the pods for protein because in a lot of places, when it's dry, like it's been in the last 3 years, the mesquite has a deeper root network system. And it gives them shelter and protection from the predators that will get to them through the mesquite. And it also provides them shade. I'm sitting there looking at the area where we put our bird water and groundwater and bird feeds and stuff. And now in the summertime, that mesquite has provided shade, which has kept the water from getting so warm. And so the animals actually have a chance to cool off. So these are things I just learned just from observation. And there's so much out there. And I think that there's not enough emphasis on learning about your area and learning about what you can do to build that knowledge.
This is very
That's
much
one of the reasons we want to move out of.
because we're trying to find a new place to live. One of the lacks we have where we live now is there is no option for foraging. Way.
Zero, yeah.
And
I would
closer to a more rural area where we have that.
Yeah.
Opportunity.
And I would so love to be able to get out and either forage for plants or just get out. Some of the fondest memories of the last 20 years was when we lived in a place where I could go out and the guy we rented from said, all right, look at this side of the road. All right, Toaster, you can go out. And basically, you can have all the firewood you want if you get it by keeping this area clean. And I did that. I went out with my Vermont cart, my axe, and my bow saw. And I loved it. So I would love to be in a place that is more open, more rural, more natural.
I remember the ground in that area had actual wintergreen growing.
Yes, it did. I saw a lot of it out there. And
yeah, I'm going to throw in what to me is an important bit, which is that plants tend to show up. If you look, I put into the chat the Peterson's Guide to Medicinal Plants. And they come for different areas, so you can get medicinal plants for New England and medicinal plants for the West Coast or whatever. But plants will show up within their range and sometimes just a little beyond them in places where they're needed. And so if you look at plants, especially what we now think of as invasive species, sometimes they have come to us because we need them. If you can think of
Yep, I think she's just locked up.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Basically, she asked me to co-host just in case that happened. So
Okay.
And she did mention the possibility of lightning knocking her out or something.
yeah,
and
she's back.
burdock and all of the things that are good for you. Have I got lost again?
Yeah,
Well, you
did
had
for
a
second.
gap there. Yeah, you had a.
But I'm just saying that the plants come to you when you need them. One year, our lawn, we don't have a lawn, but our yard was overrun with mugwort, and I mean we'd put in one mugwort plant, but suddenly it was everywhere. So we said, okay, what is mugwort like to do? Well, mugwort's for insomnia and indigestion and anxiety and depression. And we're like, oh, that's what it's doing here.
We need all this.
And you know what kudzu's really good for? Against alcoholism. And Japanese bamboo, knotweed. That is one of the best things against Lyme disease. And so if you look at something that suddenly turns up out of nowhere, go to your plant guide and see, what does this do? And often our plant allies are there. They're coming to us with more wisdom. There's something like the animals. Those of us with pets understand that your animal will come and tell you. I was talking to Lois Fitzpatrick today, and I think she's sleeping right now, but she they were visiting somebody and somebody had brought him what was labeled as a normal soft drink, and the dog started going crazy and trying to stop him from drinking this can of soda. They knew that he is highly sensitive to artificial sweeteners, and it turned out when they looked in the small print that for some reason their normal sugar sweetened soft drink had sorbitol in it.
Oh,
Now, how is a dog going to know that what's inside a can that has just been opened has a minute amount of something that his person will get sick from?
mhm.
The nose knows.
I've also heard that there's a problem with that sort of thing in some artificial sweetener in peanut butter.
Yeah,
Don't realize is that it can kill animals.
yeah.
But
That's
the
why
dog, the dog has an amazing sense of smell, and
other
now-
senses, which our population shall not overlook.
Yeah.
But yeah, get yourself. And oddly enough, another name I put in the chat is the Magic and Medicine of Plants from the editors of Reader's Digest, and it's really not available anymore except if you buy it as a used book. And so today I checked it out, and you can get a copy on Amazon for $2.16.
Wow.
So
all the way up to
$49.
$49. Yeah.
But at the same time, I particularly like it because it shows a nice drawing and it shows a picture of it in situ, as well as telling you what it was used for historically, medicinally, for culinary uses, and it's just it's an encyclopedia telling you about all these wonderful plants, and so it's one of my favorites. I have a tendency to like something different in every book, so I don't get rid of any of them. But yeah, these, I think of them as plant allies that are coming to help us, and do not overlook they're not plants. What do we call mushrooms?
fungi.
Well, they're fungi, yeah.
Yeah, I know that there's this.
I mean,
I know that there was
Is
a
that you?
lady who was. Oh, sorry.
oh no, was that Thor?
There was a lady who was older. She was almost in her 90s. She was from France, and she did a lot of work on building awareness about herbs and stuff. And I'm trying to remember her name off the top of my head. And she did a natural care book for dogs, just as one example. And it was all based on herbs and things like that. So if I find the name of her, I will share the information of that on the planning group.
Okay, put it on the entire Facebook group, because that's a useful. Yeah, yeah. We need to understand, and some of it is the plants, and our blessing is working with our energy, and use of prayer. We are borrowing or benefiting from the power of ancestors or the gods or whatever. I am myself very, when I bake, I will always take the best looking cookie from the first sheet of cookies that's coming out, and put it in in the offering dish on the altar. Our family has a belief, whether it's true or not, I'm not sure, but if you do not give the offering to the hearth goddess willingly and intentionally, she's going to take an entire sheet of cookies somewhere in the baking, and you'll burn a whole tray of cookies if you forget to give one from the first batch.
So
but-
divine blackmail.
Divine blackmail.
You
I
know,
like.
Well, we that bowl is put right beside Ganesh's image because he likes his sweets.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
So the remover of obstacles likes cookies. Okay,
he likes cookies.
Specifically, he likes any sweets.
I'll
His
remember that.
specific
He
one
does
are
not
those
like
little,
basil.
yeah. His specific like are those little balls of cooked down milk and flour called galabjaman that are soaked in a sugar syrup.
Mm.
And I
But-
can
but
understand why
there's
he
no
likes them.
reason not. At the same time, we also will, pour a glass of whatever we're having for Thor when we're having a
Mhm.
drink. Whether
Well,
it's
the
beer or rum or
libation, the
whatever.
offering, the offering, the
Yeah,
first of
offering
whatever,
to
the
God.
first fruits. Well, that's your cookie.
Yeah.
That's the first fruits.
Yeah, it's a save it, share. It's the same way we're having communion with each other. We're having communion with the with our friends, the gods. It's like, if you want to move, if you're moving your house or your apartment, you don't go and ask strangers off the street to help you move. You ask
No.
your friends, and you buy them beer and pizza or whatever, because you already have a relationship. So don't be asking the gods for something. You don't look up in your little correspondence chart, well, so and so is good for this, and so is good for that, and so is good, and address somebody you have never spoken to before and ask them for a favor. Yeah, like that's gonna work.
Mhm.
I mean, if you want to pray, you start out by telling them thanks. We've had some good times together, and then you work your way up to the request.
Mhm.
But herbs just kind of seem to have been here. They come to help. So, gosh, how sweet they are. And sing to them. Yes, this is something that is, find your own cultural thing for it. If you are Christian, you might sing your hymns. With my Anglo-Saxon background, I sing the 9 herbs chant, and you chant over your herbs while you're harvesting them. You chant over them while you're preparing them. You chant over the patient while you are applying the herbs. And the people who perceive energy have watched me do this and said, whoa, yeah, that's working. Apply it to your own work, your own way, and add the power of your voice and of music. The music will direct the energy where your intent is. And so that is something that prayer isn't just, we have been monocultural for too long.
Mhm.
In assuming that everybody prays with their hands stuck together like this and on their knees and in church. It's like, look around the world. There are lots and lots of ways to pray. You can dance, you can do service, you can sing. All prayer is being in contact with the gods. And when you do that, you will get a lot of energy flowing through. And that will get it. So when you're cooking, sing in the kitchen, even if your children make fun of you.
Mhm. I tend to swear.
Well, I'm not sure that would give the best results. But
Well, you pray by weeding in your
Mhm.
garden
Mhm.
so that when you're able to have the fresh green beans from the garden, all of that energy and power of prayer from your weeding goes into it, and then you get to get the energy from it.
Right. And I
what
kind
a
of love,
cycle.
And it's
I
a
really,
circle.
and I really love what Thomas Merton said many years ago. What I do is live. How I pray is breathe. And, you know, the fact that if all things are connected, then anytime you do anything with or to anything,
Mhm.
you ought to feel that connection. And whether it's asparagus or whatever, you know, that's there's always the sense that you are partaking of this whole web of existence and you're respecting their part of it. As long as you remember that, I think that covers just about all of it.
It kind of does. So this is we're getting close to the end. Did anybody have any
Yep.
questions or any stories that they wanted to share?
Well, I gave you mine, lady in the water bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm about out. So
Okay, I'm going to share one little thing, which is I love to be a bad example. I
hey,
am
a
because
good bad example.
the things that you did that was really stupid, you can prevent other people from doing. And
No, there's a
back
warning.
when
Noel.
I was when I was a wee little baby magic user, and in high school, a friend of mine, they all knew I was the weird one that learned about magic. And I found, I think it was a gypsy bunch of spells, but a friend of mine came to me and asked for a love potion. And I was like, you don't do that. That's a bad idea. And he said, yes, but I want to use it on myself. I want to fall in love with my friend who is in love with me, and I feel badly that I don't love her back. And so can you please give me this spell so that I will love her back, and then she will be happier, and I will be happy with it too. Well, that sounded safe since he was doing it to himself. So I did the charm up then and put it in, I think it was some fudge, and they shared it, and he was back in 2 or 3 weeks saying, can you take that off? Because yes, we love each other very much, and we're both miserable. It's like,
Okay.
it
Well.
turned out, I think I found out 6 or 7 years later, he was gay. No wonder it wasn't working.
Oh.
Oops.
But he, they were good friends, and he didn't see any reason why he shouldn't. But boy, don't ever, especially, this is to me, you don't take a piece of somebody else into you.
Yeah.
Because ingesting a bit of the other person, that's not good. So
Depends on
mess
how you're
with
doing
love
the
spells,
ingesting.
even if it sounds and so that is, so finish up with a be smart, don't be like me.
Yeah.
These gray
And the old
hairs are
motto.
wisdom that comes from lots and lots of mistakes.
The only thing worse than not having your love spell not succeed is having it succeed.
Yeah, but
It kind of reminds me of
before you
listening on.
Ask 3 times if it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Oh.
But the sign off, it was like I would listen on NPR, I think. I forget where it was, but we had 2 guys click and clack the Tappet brothers, and they would give automotive advice, and their all sign off at the end of the night was, don't drive like my brother. And the other one would say, yeah, don't drive like my brother. So somehow it seems to apply in a kind of twisted sort of way.
Yep. Anyway, so that's it for tonight. food is intrinsically magic. This is where I usually tell everybody what our guest was, and I'm going to remind anybody who hasn't already tried it. I've got a cookbook out there with recipes called Divine Cookies for making all kinds of cookies that have been dedicated to various gods or
Where do we find it?
So you can find it on it's through Lulu. I think you can find it on Amazon, or you can write me and I'll see. But anyway, but this is and the other thing I'm here to poke is to promote is Changing Times, Changing Worlds, where we work a little bit harder on learning how to make things work better rather than figuring out how they work. We're less worried about what makes it work than how do I do it better. This year it's going to be another virtual because please let's not invoke anymore. But if the Delta variant is having a surge mid-November, we'll be very happy it's virtual. The Changing Times, Changing Worlds Conference is going to be virtual this year, November 8th to 14th, 5 evenings and Saturday and Sunday. Join the Facebook page if you haven't already. And very shortly, we'll start putting up the descriptions of our speakers and classes that we're going to be picking. So I hope we you've had a good time tonight, and might come tell your friends about Otherworldly every Wednesday. And that's it.
Okay, well, I'm going to
unrecord button.
I'm going to make a request before you do that.
Yeah.
I would like to suggest a topic for a future meeting at an undefined date, which is based on my own particular struggle right now with being a person who is more intellectual than intuitive, was more likely to have been an accountant and an engineer than anything else, but is now really trying to develop the intuitive side. I've been studying the Wildwood Tarot and really trying to figure out how to get into that space. And there's a lot of people. So that's something I think for people to chew on.
How to awaken.
I think we can do that. We can do that. I mean, let's face it. I, as a double Aquarius and a biblioholic, I know this one. I do magic from an intellectual point of view. Let me see if I can find somebody else to cover that.
Okay.
All right. Well, that would be good. That's my one specific request. Is I think my struggle is probably not unique, and that people who are more intellectual than intuitive really want to develop the intuitive side, want to be able to go out into, I've studied shamanic drumming and all of these things that require me to let go of my mind in a way that I haven't been able to achieve, even after like 25 years of Zen meditation. The brain is still there, too much of a busybody. So I'll toss that out on the table and hope we can come up with something.
Well, I'll look for somebody who can address that directly, but thank you. Talk to everybody later.
All right.
Do that.
Absolutely.